In doubt, there's tremendous resistance. In hope, there's less resistance. So in hope, there's more alignment with your inner being than in doubt. In belief, there's more alignment with your inner being than hope, because there's less resistance in believing than in hope. In knowing, there is no resistance. There's less resistance in knowing than there is in believing. Because in believing, you're often still fine-tuning and honing and fiddling with it. But when you know something, you just know. When you know, you can feel the evidence of that knowing. Often goosebumps come over you, thrill bumps come, streams of thoughts come, an inspiration to move in the direction of it, which is undeniable and irresistible. And Esther doesn't need to preserve every thought that was ever thought. She's allowed to think new thoughts. That's what religions do. So many religions don't allow you to think new thoughts. You only get to think the old thoughts, even though it doesn't apply to your now society or to your now evolution or to your now expansion. And that doesn't mean that all of that is not available in religion. It certainly is. It's just often not what people who are steeped in religion are about. Because they were right then, the question is, are they still right? It's a wonderful thing. Continuity from what was to what is to what will be. It's a lovely continuity as long as it feels good. But when you're standing and you feel protective, then the past isn't serving you. It's a lovely thing. Think of now as a bouncing off place. You're bouncing forward because your inner being is not going to bounce backwards with you. And when you try, it doesn't feel good at all. We have an example for you. Something that happened right before this trip that was really one of those examples is out on the property where the Abraham Hicks Publications is and the house that Jerry and Esther built is and so forth. There is a house that Esther has moved out of, and she's moved closer to the airport. So the house is being retrofitted in Esther's mind for other important things. It's still in the vortexual state, but it's big and wonderful for her. And around that house are several magnificent, very, very old, hundreds or more year old oak trees. And there's one that sits right in front of the house that Jerry and Esther and their contractor literally built the house around. Garage could have been much bigger if not for that tree. The living room could have been much bigger if not for that tree. The house wraps around that tree. That tree really matters to Esther. So she hired a new guy, really wonderful person who's accomplishing really a lot. And she got a text from someone else that was on the property. Esther, have you okayed that? And Esther looked, and they were in the process of trimming 2 very large limbs from that tree. And by the time Esther got out there, they were down. The big limbs were down. And Esther sat in the driveway and wept because, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You would do something that drastic to something that I care so much about with no conversation with me. Now, so don't mourn for Esther. She will recover. But here's what this is all about. So, first of all, Esther doesn't live in that house and look at that tree every day. That's different. Next, one of those branches was completely blocking the entrance to that house. And Esther didn't care because she never came in that entrance. But in the new vision, that entrance is going to matter. Oh. So Esther's clinging to beliefs that she established with Jerry. Jerry's beliefs matter so much to Esther, even though his beliefs from his non-physical perspective are liberated. So Esther is clinging and defending to a rightness that is no longer active or vivid or necessary, and not giving way to what's coming next. But it feels like it should apply because it has been applying. They would be on the road while the house was still in the dream state. They'd come home, and Jerry and Mike, the contractor, would stake the house out again. The house was drawn to fit in between the trees, and then they were trying to figure out if it really would fit. So they'd stake it out, and they'd put big poles, and they'd draw ribbons. They were trying to envision the house. How many of these trees need to be trimmed or removed in order to get this house in here? And it was really a fun process. And then Jerry and Esther would go away for a while, and they'd come back, and the stakes were down, and the foundation still hadn't been poured yet. And so they'd do it all over again. So the planning of that house was so vivid in Esther's mind, and the plotting it among those trees, that was the strongest vibration from past. It was perfect then, but what was right then may not be right now, because in the evolution of things, old gives way to new all the time, unless you're clinging to the old and not willing to give way to the new. Wow. She left it by saying to that man, now I don't trust you. I don't trust you. I might come home and find my hanger empty because you think I don't need those things that are in there. What was important, and some of what was still is important, but much of what was is no longer important. But because you were right back there when what was important, you're clinging to being right instead of to what's important. And you're forgetting that your vortex knows what's really important, because you've been throwing all of this stuff into your vortex, not throwing it, putting it there delicately and precisely through life experience, through the honing of life experience. You've created a reality which is where you're going, and you can't go forward and backward at the same time, and your inner being is never looking back. And when you do, you're almost always justifying it by, I need to be right. Jerry was right. Jerry was always right. Jerry was right, and Jerry and I agreed, and we were right. And you were wrong to do something different than what we agreed upon. And we're saying to Esther, you got to let what was go and move toward what is more pertinent. But it's not an easy thing to do. So here's the thing. What is so vivid for all of you, that because you can see it and hear it and smell it and taste it and touch it. So most humans are just sorting what is into piles and calling it right and wrong and arguing with each other, and worse, about it, instead of moving toward what collectively you have discovered would be better for all of you. What happened just now in this conversation, since none of you were attached to that tree, although you felt some sympathy for Esther, none of you were attached to that tree, and you're not attached to Jerry's wishes the way Esther is attached to Jerry's wishes either. And so it would be easier for you to see the improvement than it would for Esther, because Esther's not looking for improvement, she's looking for rightness. Esther's clinging to the past in some ways. It's a little bit like looking toward what Jerry used to think instead of looking toward what Jerry is thinking. And so the important conversation here is, am I allowing my life to help me expand into more? Or am I clinging to the past in order to justify what is? That's a big question. And if you're clinging to the past to justify what is, then you're no longer creating, you're no longer moving forward, and you're pretty miserable because your inner being is calling you, you're not listening to the call. Yeah. The vortex is the vibrational existence of my most forward becoming. And my inner being is there, not demanding that I come forward, just knowing that I'm going to like it when I get there. Not judging me for not being there yet. Patient. Very patient. Esther was in quite a situation because she wants to feel good more than anyone you will ever meet, and knows how to. And she was sitting there having a knee-jerk reaction to something that she couldn't control. It was over. The limbs were down. It was over. She could not control it. But she didn't let go, even though she couldn't control it. She was beating up on herself about not having been in a better position to control it. She was missing the entire point. Because the point isn't to control conditions and situations. The point is to find alignment anyway. That's the point. And that feels a little threatening, because a lot of people have been creating their life through a really, we don't want to be disrespectful of you, but a really inadequate ability to control. You cannot control. Well, you can't control much. When you seek to control by pushing against what you don't want, you lose all of your power.